Hi students, in this lecture we will be finishing up our discussions on human population. In this lecture we will be covering the concept of a demographic transition and how that affects fertility, population growth. We'll also be learning about birth control and looking at some projections for the world's population. After studying this lesson, you should be able to answer the following questions. How does population growth change as a society develops? And what factors slow down or speed up human population growth? Here we see birth rates in the United States from 1910 to 2000. The following birth rate from 1910 to 1929 represents a demographic transition from an agricultural to an industrial society. The baby boom following World War II lasted from 1945 to 1965. A much smaller echo boom occurred around 1980 when the baby boomers started to reproduce. Stage 1, in figure 4.14, represents the conditions in a pre-modern society. Food shortages, malnutrition, lack of sanitation and medicine, accidents and other hazards generally kept death rates in such a society around 30 per 1,000 people. Birth rates are correspondingly high to keep population densities relatively constant. Economic development in Stage 2 brings better jobs, medical care, sanitation, and a generally improved standard of living, and death rates often fall very rapidly. Birth rates may actually rise at first as more money and better nutrition allow people to have the children they always wanted. In a couple of generations, however, birth rates fall as people see that all their children are more likely to survive and that the whole family benefits from concentrating more resources on fewer children. Note that populations grow rapidly during Stage 3 when death rates have already fallen but birth rates remain high. Depending on how long it takes to complete the transition, the population may go through one or more rounds of doubling before coming into balance again. Stage 4 represents conditions in developed countries, where the transition is complete and both birth rates and death rates are low, often a third or less than those in the pre-development era. The population comes into a new equilibrium in this phase, but at a much larger size than before. Most of the countries of Northern and Western Europe went through a demographic transition in the 19th or early 20th century, similar to the curves below in figure 4.14. In countries such as Italy, where fertility rates have fallen below replacement rates, there are now fewer births than deaths, and the total population curve has started to decline. Some countries have had remarkable success in population control. In Thailand, China, and Colombia, for instance, total fertility dropped by more than half in 20 years. Morocco, Jamaica, Peru, and Mexico all have seen fertility rates fall by 30 to 40% in a single generation. Surprisingly, one of the most successful family planning advances in recent years has been in Iran, a predominantly Muslim country. The Indian states of Kerala and Andhra Pradesh exemplify two very different approaches to regulating population growth. In Kerala, providing a fair share of social benefits to everyone, socialism, is seen as the key to family planning. This social justice strategy assumes that the world has enough resources for everyone, but inequitable social and economic systems cause maldistributions of those resources. Hunger, poverty, violence, environmental degradation, and overpopulation are symptoms of a lack of justice rather than a lack of resources. Although overpopulation exacerbates other problems, a focus on growth rates alone encourages racism and hatred of the poor. Proponents of this perspective argue that richer people should recognize the impacts of their exorbitant consumption has on others. The leaders of Andhra Pradesh, on the other hand, have adopted a strategy of aggressively emphasizing birth control rather than promoting social justice. This strategy depends on policies similar to those in China that assume providing carrots, economic rewards for reducing births, along with sticks, mandates for limiting reproduction, together with punishment for exceeding limits, are the only effective ways to regulate population size. Both states have slowed population growth significantly, and though they employ very different strategies, both aim to avoid a demographic trap in which rapidly growing populations exceed the sustainable yield of local forests, grasslands, croplands, and water resources. Do we reduce pressure on the environment by achieving population control in developing countries, or by limiting resource use in developed countries? It depends on whom you ask. The 1994 International Conference on Population and Development in Cairo, Egypt, supported this approach to population issues. A broad consensus, reached by the 180 participating countries, agreed that responsible economic development, education, and women's rights, along with high-quality health care, including family planning services, must be accessible to everyone if population growth is to be slowed. Child survival is one of the most critical factors in stabilizing population. When infant and child mortality rates are high, as they are in much of the developing world, parents tend to have high numbers of children to ensure that some will survive to adulthood. There has never been a sustained drop in birth rates that was not first preceded by a sustained drop in infant and child mortality. As we can see in this figure, total fertility also declines as women's education increases. Knowing that this relationship exists, and what you have learned so far in this chapter, what would you recommend to the government of Ethiopia if they asked you to recommend some ideas to reduce their country's fertility rate? Family planning allows couples to determine the number and spacing of their children. It doesn't necessarily mean fewer children. People could use family planning to have the maximum number of children possible. But it does imply that the parents will control their reproductive lives and make rational, conscious decisions about how many children they will have and when those children will be born, rather than leaving it to chance. As the desire for smaller families becomes more common, birth control often becomes an essential part of family planning. In this context, birth control usually means any method used to reduce births, including celibacy, delayed marriage, contraception, methods that prevent embryo implantation, and induced abortions. The high human birth rate of the last 2 centuries is not the norm compared to previous millennia of human existence. Evidence suggests that people in every culture and every historic period used a variety of techniques to control population size. Studies of hunting and gathering people, such as the Kung or San of the Kalahari Desert in southwest Africa, indicate that our early ancestors had stable population densities, not because they killed each other or starved to death regularly, but because they controlled fertility. For instance, San women breastfeed children for 3 or 4 years. When calories are limited, lactation depletes body fat stores and suppresses ovulation. Coupled with taboos against intercourse while breastfeeding, this is an effective way of spacing children. However, breastfeeding among well-nourished women in modern societies doesn't necessarily suppress ovulation or prevent conception. Other ancient techniques to control population size include celibacy, folk medicines, abortion, and infanticide. We may find some or all of these techniques unpleasant or morally unacceptable, but we shouldn't assume that other people are too ignorant or too primitive to make decisions about fertility. In addition, more than 100 new contraceptive methods are now being studied, and some appear to have great promise. Nearly all are biologically based, e.g. hormonal, rather than mechanical, e.g. condom or IUD. Recently, the U.S. Food and Drug Administration approved 5 new birth control products. 4 of these use various methods to administer female hormones to prevent pregnancy. Other methods are years away from use, but take a new direction entirely. Vaccines for women are being developed that will prepare the immune system to reject the hormone chorionic gonadotropin, which maintains the uterine lining and allows egg implantation, or that will cause an immune reaction against sperm. Injections from men are focused on reducing sperm production and have proven effective in mice. Because there's often a lag between the time when a society reaches replacement birth rate and the end of population growth, we are deciding now what the world will look like in 100 years. How many people will be in the world a century from now? Most demographers believe that world population will stabilize sometime during the 21st century. When we reach that equilibrium, the total number of humans is likely to be somewhere around 8 to 10 billion, depending on the success of family planning programs and the multitude of other factors affecting human populations. The United Nations Population Division projects 4 population scenarios. The optimistic, or low, projection suggests that world population might stabilize by about 2030 and then drop back below current levels. This doesn't seem likely. The medium projection shows a population of about 9 billion in 40 years, while the high projection would reach 12 billion by mid-century. Successful family planning programs often require significant societal changes. Among the most important of these are: 1. Improved social, educational, and economic status for women. Birth control and women's rights are often linked. 2. Improved status for children. Fewer children are born if they are not needed as cheap labor source. 3. Acceptance of calculated choice as a valid element in life in general and in fertility in particular. The belief that we have no control over our lives discourages a sense of responsibility. 4. Social security and political stability that give people the means and the confidence to plan for the future. And 5. The knowledge, availability, and use of effective and acceptable means of birth control. Concerted efforts to bring about these types of societal changes can be effective. 20 years of economic development and work by voluntary family planning groups in Zimbabwe, for example, have lowered total fertility rates from 8 to 5.5 children per woman on average. Surveys show that desired family sizes have fallen nearly by half, 9 to 4.6, and that nearly all women and 80% of men in Zimbabwe use contraceptives. Already, nearly half the world population lives in countries where the total fertility rate is at or close to the replacement rate. The example of Brazil gives us hope that with rising standards of living, population growth will spontaneously slow without harsh government intervention. This figure presents fertility rates by country. Although average fertility in the United States is currently 2.06, it's below the replacement rate of 2.1 children per woman. As you can see from this graphic, Sub-Saharan Africa and parts of the Middle East have the highest fertility rates. From our study thus far, can you explain what causes the difference between North America and Central Africa? This chapter has covered some of the main issues of human population growth. A few decades ago, we were warned that human population was exploding and that immediate action was needed. China took the drastic step of mandating one child per family. But was this really necessary? China is now facing a population problem of another type, as they do not have sufficient replacements for their current population. Birth rates have fallen across the developed world as the demographic transition influences fertility rates. However, population growth remains virtually out of control in the less developed regions of the world. According to Hans Rosling, the single greatest contribution to population control in the developing world is to reduce child mortality. Other keys to population control include access to family planning, female education, and economic development. Family planning, critical to allowing women to have reproductive choice, remains controversial. But given our estimate of a carrying capacity of 10 to 12 billion humans and our current population projections of 9 billion humans by the middle of this century, it is possible that we will soon discover the planet's response to a human population experiment. Perhaps we will soon discover who was correct, Malthus or Marx.